We Asmeri are guided by the spirit. It provides prey, shelter, even love.
Welcome back, you filthy exiles. I'm in a good mood today. It's been a great week, actually. Anyway, so we obviously had the announcement yesterday for the 020 league patch, whatever you want to call it, right? Anyway, for Path of Exile 2. So a fair few things came out of that, and we're going to talk about some of that today. Now, I'll do a separate video around the endgame rework because I actually think, like, it's not a bad change. Like, it addresses the issues in the immediate, and I think people are like stumbling to the conclusion that it only affects white maps, but I would be under the understanding that it's based on the mod pool on the map. But anyway, we'll talk about that. Some of the high level things. So basically they reworked the whole endgame system, at least to what it is now. So there's less towers, they're more impactful towers. They do a lot more as far as the mod pool that's available, and they're a lot more potent. I'm not negative to that. I think that's okay. Build diversity starts to come into conversation here. They mentioned in the Q&A, and I think just looking at the initial, like, you know, thing that they did, the 38 minute whatever, the Q&A actually had a lot of information in it around, what they're alluding to in the patch notes, which is why they haven't released them yet. Basically, build diversity will be a big focus. So they're adding in a number of new uniques as well that will be chase uniques, which are like your T0 uniques, the ones that you want to go after. So that's also really good. So moving away from ingenuity and Hoa and stuff like that. They also alluded to a couple of things they're nerfing. So the first two on the chopping block are heralds and herald stacking and attribute stacking. So they're going to nerf that. That was inevitable, all right? That let's be real, like, Hoa was ridiculous. That whole situation was ridiculous. And they're also bringing, they said they're balancing up the lower end on a number of items too. So what we'll see, hopefully across the board, is just a sweeping slate of balances to the skills that are not performing as well versus the skills that have been totally abused, which is like 3 or 4 main skills, which is ridiculous. Now, they didn't specifically mention big changes to Monk or anything like that. I think a few people noted that in the comments. The reason being is those things are working, and even if they nerf that down, it's still going to be really strong. It's the other areas that need attention. Unfortunately, armor is still bricked, and it looks like they just don't know how to fix armor right now, so that's going to be a total reinvent the wheel, and we'll probably get a league for that, where they'll do like League of Armor or something like that, who knows. But that'll be hopefully before the end of the EA. Well, it really has to be before the end of the EA. So what that means is with the new Ascendancy they've added in too for the Warrior, like, that actually looks really good. We'll do a separate video deep diving that because that is really appealing. There's a mechanic that I think may be a bit, if it works the same as Path of Exile 1, yeah, we can exploit the living daylights out of that with an item that they're adding to the game. We'll talk about that in that video. And this is only something that old dog build creators from PoE 1 would know how it works. So if they're going to do what I think they're going to do, then we might have a really OP Ascendancy on our hands, which will allow us to play free Giant's Blood. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. Outside of that, like, endgame quality is better, the portal system's better, the tower system's improved. Pinnacles now have 50% more life than what they previously used to have, which makes them a lot more accessible at difficulty 0 and then the same at difficulty 4. So that's really good. You've got corrupted nexuses will be how you progress your maps moving forwards. And the biggest thing is that maps will no longer drop like randomly as they were, or waystones, sorry. You'll have, once you get to like T5 waystones, all you will be able to drop is T5 waystones or greater. And that's essentially rebalancing the way that waystone drops work, which is fantastic. I think that's great. So basically they're leading to, this is a lot more deterministic progression for the mapping system in the endgame. These were all grievances I had with Path of Exile 2, to be honest with you. Like, outside of like power balance and stuff like that, I actually think it is a fun game once you get a build working in it. And this patch may allow for a lot more of that to happen. Spectres are being added into the game finally. God knows what OP crap we'll be able to do with Spectres. Then of course we've got the Amazon, or the Huntress. I'm just gonna call it Amazon because that's what she is. Basically, and there's an ascendancy called the Amazon Ascendancy, or whatever, you know, Amazon, whatever. Anyway, moral of the story, Lightning Spear Javazons are going to be playable in Path of Exile 2, which I'm super keen on because that was one of the best builds that was ever invented in Diablo 2. And even beyond that, there is part of the Ascendancy that allows you to clone a monster and have that trail around. That's very similar to, again, Diablo 2. So I'm really keen for that. That's probably what I'm going to start as, because quite frankly, that's going to be the easiest to build to, and I've already got a good build in mind for it, and we'll do a separate video for that, which will hopefully be within the next 2 days. Outside of that, like, I've had a lot of criticisms for the game, and the reasons why were all the things, or many of the things that were being addressed. The portal system, you know, no matter how you criticize it, right, you're still, if you roll 4 mods on a waystone, right, it's, you know, you're going to have what, 3 portals that you can run off the back of that, so, or 2 to 3 portals. So, like, you know, that's better than what we were dealing with previously. It's not as brutal. Now, they did add caveats to that. So if you hit a boss map and you go to the boss, like, you go down to that one try on the boss, I think, like, there's a bit of cope there, and I think eventually they'll just hedge on that. Also, on Pinnacles, there's no longer any... You don't gain XP, but you don't lose XP on Pinnacle boss fights, which I actually think is a great idea, which means you're not going to go into a boss room and lose your whole bar of XP anymore. You can attempt it when you're in the middle of leveling from 95 to 96 or something like that. Overall, like, I think a number of these changes are really cool. Yeah, so anyway, let's get into a bit of the visual deep dive and just have a look at some of the stuff from the main video, and then, yeah, that's basically it. I just overall, I think, like, you know, yeah, there's criticism you could make about the patch, but overall, like, I'm relatively happy with what I've seen so far. But yeah, anyway, let's get into some of the details of the I guess, release or reveal. Okay, so along with the changes that were announced were a number of new crafting items. Now, I had to watch a combination of the Q&A and also the reveal to get a lot more information out of this. But basically, we now have multiple tiers of runes. So we have like a lesser, a moderate, mid-tier, which is referred to as, it's just your standard rune. And then you have a greater tier of runes, so these scale up over time. Again, like, I think these are great. This is a good idea. Outside of this, then the Omen drop rates have also been adjusted. So basically, every single ritual that you do moving forwards will have at least 1 Omen in it, which means Omens will be a lot more available as opposed to what they were before, which was a really expensive crafting sort of strategy. They're also adding fracturing orbs into the game as well. Now, I absolutely love fracturing because this was a mechanic out of Delve, but basically what it allows you to do is to fracture a modifier onto an item, and then essentially that modifier is fixed to that item and it will never change. So if you can get like +3 or +4 or +5 to gem level on an item, then you can re-roll everything else on the item and totally modify it in the best possible way, which is really cool. Outside of that, you've also got Expedition Recombination being added into the game. This is essentially deterministic recombination. Now, according to what they said in the Q&A, they're actually still changing this mechanic. So you'll be able to select the mod from each item that you want to have as your preference mod, and then basically you can run the recombination. Now, to fuel this, you have to complete Expedition content and collect all the different drops off Expedition. This sort of gives you a purpose to play Expedition too. Recombination was very powerful originally, so this is actually not a bad mod at all. I actually think this is really cool. I'm totally with this. Now, greater essences have also been made a lot more available to be able to be crafted with. And also they added a lot of like blocking. So there was a thing called mod blocking and things like that in Path of Exile 1. And they're essentially doing that with essences now. So in particular, greater essences and stuff like that, which is going to make it a lot easier to craft gear to an element of it. But this is just something we'll have to have a look and see in the patch notes, what they've added in, and then we'll do a bit of a deep dive over this. But again, I think this is okay. The problem with this is how available is this early on, and that's something that we're going to have to learn with the release. Now, the last one is Asmerian Wisps. So what these are is essentially basically infused monsters, and they drop what are called talismans, which is not the old talismans from Path of Exile 1, which was an amulet nobody used. That Chris Wilson loved, but they're basically socketable talismans that you can put in your rune sockets in your gear that give you modifiers like 1 rage on melee hit, or corrupted blood immunity, and different things like that. Which, by the way, like, I don't even know, I think corrupted blood immunity is in Path of Exile 2, but it's really hard to get. This is a really easy way to get it, which means you can stack up your gear, get better mods on your gear because you can craft better gear, and then you can use your rune sockets for actual utility bonuses, which is pretty cool. I think this is a good use of this mechanic. This is probably not like my ideal preference, but you know what? It's going to be fun either way. Like, I think these inclusions to crafting will make getting your gear on an SSF basis just a little bit easier. Then beyond that, they've added like a Kalandra back into the game, and you'll also be able to get dusk rings, which allow you to adjust the prefix and suffixes, and the Tenebrous amulet, which is basically a simplex amulet, and this again allows you to do exactly the same things to modify your prefix and suffixes on gear. If you want me to do a video explaining that, I can, for those who haven't done crafting in Path of Exile before. But yeah, I think like overall these changes are not too bad. Like they are adding in a lot more juice. In particular, like we're also getting a lot of other stuff added to the game as well, which we'll talk about in the next segment. But like, yeah, is it perfect? Do we have crafting bench here? No. Is it much better than what we've been using in Path of Exile 2? 100%. It is a crafting system now. Like previously it was just all like Gamba. Now with more omens and stuff like that and availability and more purpose to complete this endgame content and level it up as well, I feel like we're going in the right direction finally. We're very like raw in that release we've been playing to date, so this is going to make the game significantly more fun. It's going to make it a lot more SSF ability, like SSFable as well, so solo self-found is going to be a bit more sort of approachable. Which is moving more in the direction of hopefully like Last Epoch's deterministic crafting systems and whatnot. It's not perfect. I wish we had alteration orbs coming back, but that doesn't appear to be the case, or scours. But this is I guess the next best thing. Okay, so the next big change that we'll cover off here in the, I guess, the reveal, and I guess we'll keep this video relatively limited, so we'll talk about this one now, is the portal system. So in revising it and having a look at it in more detail and looking at the Q&A and whatnot, so how this works is not just like you run your white tier maps and, you know, you get to like tier 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, or whatever, and that's it. You're on one portal at very end game. It's actually based on the mods that are on the waystones, but we'll run the footage and then we'll talk about it. Yeah.
Thing that we've seen a lot of feedback about is sustaining waystones. As we looked into it, we realized that the people who couldn't sustain waystones were dying a lot more than we had expected, and that made us realize something. During the campaign, the expectation is that you can die multiple times in order to learn how to overcome challenges. You are able to learn how the monsters behave, adapt to their skills, and eventually overcome them. But as soon as you get to the endgame, you are effectively no longer allowed to die if you want to sustain waystones. By the time you are getting towards the end of endgame, we want you to have to be careful not to die. But it certainly shouldn't be that we have such a sudden shift as you run your first maps. The first change we're making is you can now respawn and return to a map if you die. Continuing from where you left off. When you start the endgame, you get up to 6 total attempts per map. As you add more modifiers to a waystone, the number of respawns goes down. This means that as you get to the point that you're running every waystone as a rare, you will have to be more careful. In parties, everyone gets to respawn that number of times. But we still think it's important that you can kill a boss in one go. In order to allow that to happen, we've made a change so that once you start the boss fight, it changes over to the same respawning system we use for Pinnacle bosses. This means that the map owner can choose to respawn everyone at the same time. Another complaint we've seen a lot of is players not wanting to do the Pinnacle content because of the experience penalty from dying. A change we've made here is that all Pinnacle content now no longer grants experience, but also no longer removes experience on death either.
Alright, so this is the really important point of where this this sort of covers off on. It's based on the modifiers. So, if you have a T15 map, you have 4 modifiers, you'll still have a few portals on that map, right? it's not it's not based on tier, it's simply based on modifiers. So the rarer the map you run, the harder the map you run, the less portals you're going to have. But the way that the game is balanced is to be able to run that upper tier content anyway, your build needs to be quite complete at that difficulty level. So there is a balance here. You can run a lesser T16 map or T15 map, right? That's if your character's a little weaker. And so basically you could have more portals. You might have like 3 or 4 mods on it. So you have 2 to 3 portals remaining on the map. And so basically you don't get the full 6 portals, but you do get a few goes at that map. This is not as good as 6 portals, I understand. But this is a drastic improvement over one death, one map. Now, the people who are running like fully juiced out maps and whatnot, you would expect they would have pretty juiced out complete characters that would die very rarely. This isn't inconsistent with how Path of Exile 1 works either. So Path of Exile 1 has that much higher level power cap. So your character gets to that level a lot sooner. So when you get to T16s, you trivialize them, right? This is just balancing that in between. And I feel like this is an okay middle ground. Like this isn't too bad. And so my standpoint is I'm actually okay with this. This is a good change. And it's a change that will make the game a lot more fun, right? It's not going to be one death, one map. You lose all the progress. You can go back in, pick your gear up. If you don't want to run as hard endgame maps, you can take the mods down. If you just want to farm like Expedition, you can run easier expeditions and stuff like that. So you can target farm content and progress that as well at that upper level without extreme modifiers on the map. I think that is good. And the other thing that we don't know about yet is the level of balance changes to the enemies and white packs and stuff like that. So I would say in the combination of all of that, this is being toned down closer to a PoE 1.5 than an extreme Dark Souls mode in PoE 2. I know that people might be upset with that comment, but I don't care. And it's not Path of Exile 1, right? It's like a middle ground between the two, and there is this bit of a striker balance in there. I can live with this because this makes the game, for me, a hell of a lot more fun. This was my biggest issue with the whole game. Like, this is one of my biggest issues with the end game, and I feel like this is an okay compromise. And the fact that you no longer get XP loss anymore on your Pinnacle boss fights is fantastic. So I can live with this change. And I know eventually they'll probably tune this again, and they'll make it a little easier and more approachable, and the end game will just be focused on fun. That's basically where we're going. They're just adding back, you know, the elements they had in PoE 1 into PoE 2, and they're making it a lot more fun. And you know what? I am not negative to this change at all. I'm not gonna be like, this is terrible. I was negative to the one portal, one map, and I'm glad that they changed it. It made sense that they would change it, and that was the overarching criticism from the community. And I feel like this is an okay compromise, and this is just pitching the game in the right direction again. So I'm really happy with this change overall. Okay, so outside of all these changes, obviously 100 new support gems, 100 new uniques coming into the game, a lot more meaningful uniques, and there's included in there chase uniques. Overall though, like, we'll do a bit of a deep dive in separate videos just around the Amazon or the Huntress, because I think it's a fantastic class, and I'm going to play it on League Start. Call it League Start. I think the new Ascendancy for the Warrior looks really cool, and I'm going to do a separate video later today about that because there's some cool stuff in there, like I said at the start of the video. Overall, like, I'm okay with nerfs at the upper end and buffs at the lower end, and if that's how it's going to play out, as sort of run through the new crafting system, or the additions to crafting and the flesh out, and also the additions or the readjustments to the portal system we're mapping, I like. Overall, look, I think it's a pretty good change overall for the game, for the better, and it will create fun. It will make the game more enjoyable. It'll take away some of the element of pointless grind, because there's more to it. Like, we're getting rogue exiles. We haven't even covered that off in this video, which look really cool. But overall, like, my opinion of this has changed. Like, I don't know, there's something about it that doesn't feel the same as their previous announcements for Path of Exile 1 or whatnot, and it might just be because they're becoming a bigger company and whatnot. But I think, like, this was a good change in the right direction, and, you know, they did listen to the community. Like, they have their vision they're going to work to, realistically, that, you know, the vision comes back into the conversation as it always has. And, okay, that's fine. if there's a compromise between what the community wants and what their vision is, I feel like this patch was it. So I'm not going to persecute them over that. I like, it sort of won me back a little bit from where my headspace was previously, which is great because that's what I want to see. These changes were all things that I have mentioned in videos previous as well. I'll just make that addition in there, and void of criticisms that were put in the comments and whatnot, it's pretty apparent that, you know, I was representing a large, you know, portion of the community in the comments that I have been saying, and so, you know, I feel like a large number of players that had lost confidence from, you know, even the last patch will come back to the game, including myself, because now this makes me want to, like, you know, unwind builds and figure stuff out and things like that. Anyway, if you like this video and videos like this, don't forget to like and sub to the channel. But until next time, or the next video, I'll see you guys on live stream later tonight. We'll probably be playing some Path of Exile 2 just to get practice in before things change. Will there be a curation video for a list of builds? Probably am still going to do that, but it'll be post patch notes, and it'll be going through, I'll do a deep dive on the patch notes as well, and then we'll parallel that to the builds that I'll recommend to at least look at. I'm not going to recommend league starter builds, but completed builds that you can follow as a bit of an example with POBs and stuff like that. And the reason for that is it gives you a direction to build your pathing tree or heat map your pathing tree so that you're just not like flying off in the wrong place, and an idea of the gear that you need to get for those builds. But definitely I've got an idea for the Amazon, and I'll share that a little bit later today with a POB to go with that as well, at least at a base level, and then the adjustments we'll need to make to that. But yeah, anyway, until next time, I'll see you guys later on, and have a good one.